Build creative confidence. Beat the inspiration addiction. Join the Writer's Gym. Hello everybody, I'm Rachel Knightley. Welcome back to the Writer's Gym. We are with Ali Wilkes today. Ali's debut novel, All the White Spaces, was a Bram Stoker-award finalist, and her second novel, Where the Dead Wait, was one of Esquire's best horror books of 2023. Her short fiction has been published in numerous magazines and anthologies from publishers including Nightmare Magazine, Cosmic Horror Monthly, Flame Tree Press, Erie River, and Nepenthe Press. Her next novel, Man-Eater, set in the fevered jungles of the Amazon during the late Victorian orchid hunting craze, will be published in February 2027. Ali, it's been a really good thing that where there are writers that I admire, and I'm seeing sort of how that jigsaw of life operates. That's been a really nice thing for me. Am I right? You discovered aerial through research in climbing the rigging, is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's actually aerial silks that I concentrate on, so verticals rather than the big hoop in the sky. But yes, I was back, I think, in 2016 when I was desperately trying to research All the White Spaces, my debut. And I wanted to learn a lot about what it would feel like to be on the ropes of an old sailing ship, and also how quickly someone assigned female at birth would be able to develop the upper body strength to do various things, and what it would feel like physically and so on. And so I thought, well, no one's going to let me, as someone who A, hasn't sailed before, and B, gets madly seasick, go on an old-fashioned sailing ship. But on the other hand, there was a circus school literally half an hour's walk from my house. So I signed up to do a one-day introduction to ropes and silks, and I absolutely loved it. It sort of became an instant part of my life literally that afternoon. And so, yeah, that was 2016, and I'm still, I still went to class last night. So that's a pretty consistent joy that I've discovered through wanting to immerse myself in what my protagonist might be feeling.
I sort of relate to that feeling of, in different examples, discovering something that works for you as a person through something that the character needs to do. What was it that spoke to you about that?
I think it's because it's a total workout for both brain and body. You gain strength very, very fast, a lot of upper body strength, because in order to do the least thing, you will be climbing into the air. So you'll be climbing up a rope or a silk multiple times per training session. So you do get quite interestingly hench quite fast. And then it is, when I say it's a total workout for the brain, you cannot be thinking about anything else really apart from what you're doing, because it is dangerous. It is in the air. You are holding yourself up through a number of pretty convoluted and contorted knots and dropping from them or spinning onto them, etc. And you really can't be doing that whilst thinking very earnestly about what else is going wrong in your life. You have to sort of commit to the bit, which is important.
So it's a sort of state of flow by necessity, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing I really liked about it is because I am, in inverted commas, a full-time writer, whatever that means. I live by myself. I work by myself. It's anyone who's been to the Writer's Gym will know writing can be quite an isolating profession. And being part of a circus school means that multiple times a week, I have to get myself out of the house. I have to get myself into a training hangar filled with other people I know very well, teachers I know very well, people I see regularly. And it just forces me to interact with the outside world a little bit, which is very important for someone who's such an introvert like me and has made the choice to go down a very particularly introverted career path.
Speaking as definitely an introvert, the energy that I get comes from being alone. The way I plug myself in to get the petrol is time alone, but it is about finding, when you are with other people, that it's on authentic terms, that you find a community, you find an activity, you find all the things that you find that are based on who you truly are. And that's really the balance, isn't it? I wrote a thing called Shooting the Should Fairies, and it was because of shoulds, like I should do more things with people. And actually, it does have to be the right things with people, doesn't it? The right things for you.
It does. It absolutely has to be the right thing with people. And also, I forgot to mention the other thing that I've really got out of circus as a sort of like work-life balance thing is as an adult and as someone in her 40s who isn't particularly a natural athlete, it is really, really good to constantly try and struggle with something that you are shit at. I think that's really useful for people as adults to do something they're not immediately good at. And I think it's really good to be experiencing failure, setback, struggle on a day-to-day basis. And it's particularly useful for writers because you really do have to let go of the idea that you're going to get it right first time. It rewards persistence, and there's a lot of fun to be had in failure, both in circus, I think, and also in writing.
I'm so happy hearing you say that. I'm a beginner guitarist. I'd gone away from guitar for all of my life, and it was very difficult, and I can now strum a 3-chord song that I love very much and understand what it is I'm doing and hear it properly. And the thrill of being adequate at something I am fairly shit at. Can I ask you a bit about the journey towards writing every day? Because you mentioned, I've lost the exact wording now, but you're writing on your own, you live on your own, and there's a part of me where that's the dream, but there's also a part of me where I know with me there needs to be a sort of people element. Did that start when your first novel, which is wonderful, did it start then? Was it happening before? What was it like getting there?
Well, first of all, when I say I'm a full-time writer, I mean that writing and things associated with writing are my principal job. It does not in any way mean I write every day. I want to dispel that myth immediately. I am a fits and starts person. I can go 6 months or so without working on a novel and then immerse myself in it and then drop it again and then pick it up again. I do not write every day. I'm not one of those people, and that is fine. But I am full-time in that this is my main source of income. This is my business. And the way that sort of came about was that I had an entire different career and life before this. I was a criminal barrister working in London and the South East. And I did that for 10 to 11 years. And it was every bit what you'd expect, you know, the wigs, the gowns, the jury trials, the working 60, 70-hour weeks, the constant stress, etc. And it just wasn't for me. It wasn't in any way healthy for my mental health, and it wasn't really where I wanted to be. But I'd always had this passion for sort of writing and books and creativity from when I was a very young person. And one of the sort of like little holidays I would give myself from being a barrister was every now and then I would work on a creative project. And I used to carve out time by taking part in NaNoWriMo every year. Rest in peace, NaNoWriMo. It died under the weight of AI and particularly horrible scandals. So, you know, hard to mourn for it. But at the time, it was really productive for me. And so most Novembers, I would have a novel on the go. Most Novembers, I would be writing. And the sort of crunch time came when I simultaneously realized that A, I did not want to be a barrister anymore. It wasn't working out for me. And B, what I wanted to do was something more creative. And also because at the time I was on a creative writing course, I was getting the support and feedback and reassurance that actually I didn't suck at it and it would be possible for me if I was willing to take, you know, a bit of a leap of faith. And I did the classic thing that you're told not to do, which is give up your day job. I don't recommend that to anyone, but for me, it was the right thing to do because being a barrister was depleting me so incredibly much on every front. But I gave up my day job and I had maybe a year of living off savings and thinking, shit, I have made the world's wildest mistake before I finally got an agent and went out on submission and sold my first book.
That is just as painful as it is to go through. I'm going to say so good to hear. The best decision of my life was also giving up full-time work that on paper looked like a wonderful thing to be doing and very impressive and and was making me utterly, utterly miserable and unhealthy. And every good decision I've made involves having more time to write. And it's not about using every single moment for writing, but it's about having the time so you can circle, you can do your landing pattern, you can eventually get there. But I do love hearing the fact that I wish I could tell you how many people will come to me still believing that anyone who is successful, that it is sort of binary, that it is either you are successful or you're not, or it all just evolved naturally. And actually these moments, these dark nights of the soul where it is a case of, oh God, I've made the worst decision anybody could have made. It's the same thing that happens with manuscripts, isn't it? You know, there's a moment where you go, it's awful, I'm awful, everything's awful, it's never going to work. And then eventually when you are looking back at it going, I needed to go through that in order to be where I am now. That's, yeah.
Absolutely. And I do have friends who it happened in the traditional pattern. They were working a really good job and they wrote their debut novel in their spare time, and then they sold it for megabucks, and then they were told they could safely quit their jobs, etc. Amazing. I could not be happier for them. They are extremely deserving individuals. But that's not what happened for me. For me, it was a sort of decision in my late 30s that I couldn't carry on at the bar anymore. And I'd made some small lifestyle changes that got myself into a position where I was sort of ready to launch. So I'd taken a secondment at a bank in Canary Wharf. So I was working out of the same place every day. It was very much more of a 9 to 5. I had spare time in the evenings and weekends because I wasn't physically allowed to take my work home with me. And so I was getting that time. I also enrolled in the Curtis Brown Creative 6-month novel writing course, which I'm sure various people will have heard of. For me, this was pre-pandemic. So I did the 6-month in-person in London course, which meant 2 evenings a week, I was sitting in Curtis Brown's headquarters with 15 other aspiring novelists and a tutor. So I was giving up my evenings and I was constantly around writing, writers, the feedback loop, agents, editors, etc. So that was a really useful sort of galvanizing process. And by a combination of Curtis Brown and working at the bank, which was a great deal better paid than being a criminal barrister, I managed to build up sort of the financial reserves, but also the morale reserves I needed to get myself through that really tricky hinterland of, I've given up everything, I don't even have an agent, what is this?
And did the agent come through Curtis Brown, or was that later separate conversation?
It was a later separate thing. So the way Curtis Brown's 6-month courses work, I don't know if they work this way for their smaller courses. At the end of the course, you have your writing circulated around the agency and people can express interest in you and things like that. And so there is a sort of like an onboarding process. And then if you want to submit your work to a Curtis Brown agent after the course ends, there is a sort of back door where you can bypass the slush pile and go direct to an agent with your full manuscript. And I don't mind telling you, I had my fair share of cracks through that process. I think I had 4 attempts with no luck, with very lovely feedback. In particular, shout out to Emma Finn, who gave me the most incredibly detailed set of notes that really propelled me to being a much better writer. But I had all my cracks through that sort of backdoor process, and then went out on wider submission. And I found my agent, which is Ollie Munson from AM Heath, very much one of the big London literary agencies. I got him from the slush pile. I was just very lucky with the slush pile process. I submitted it on a weekend through his website. He DM'd me on Twitter a couple of days, and actually I think it was the same day, saying, this looks good, can I see the rest? I emailed him the rest. He sent me emails saying, you know, I'm still reading, I like it, I'm still reading, I like it, I'm still reading, I like it, can you come in on Thursday? And that was how I got Ollie. And he said afterwards he was very lucky, again, in terms of timing, because he had managed to pick my slush pile 3,000 words up at a point in which he didn't really have many meetings that week. He didn't really have much else going on. And so unusually for an agent, he could just sit on the couch in his room and just read my things start to finish. And I am, I think, forever blessed by that synchronicity of timing, really, that I was ready for him and he was ready for me.
Correct me if any of this is wrong, please, but you came back, that manuscript, when you said you had a few cracks at it, you came back with it. The difference between this happening and this not happening is coming back, is going, this is still not working. I'm going to do the feedback that I've been given. I'm going to keep coming back, which is not always an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm maybe not lucky. I would say I'm fortunate in that I know so many people who have tried multiple times to get an agent, and they have kept coming back, and their persistence is absolutely outstanding and noteworthy. I'm not sure I'm the sort of person who could have weathered 100 rejections or something like that. I think I was very fortunate to be picked up early enough in the process that my appetite for coming back was still intact.
Something that Priya Sharma said to me just strikes me over and over again, the importance of when you're up a ladder, not taking the ladder with you. And when I speak to people who have got through that, you've always been very welcoming. You've always been willing to talk about what's happened. She's like that as well. And I think that is so important, isn't it? It's being a good role model, because even if we might cringe at the thought that we are, there's always somebody looking at wherever you are going, ooh, it's a long way up. And, making that human, making that something that, it's not binary, it's not perfect. There's still hard things to deal with, I think is important in a writing life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I find about the writing community, in particular the horror writing community, is that it is very much that. It is a community. People will support you till the end of days. It's incredible with how generous people are with their time, with their resources, and with their encouragement. I certainly couldn't have got to even the process of taking my manuscript out to an agent without my first readers who I met on writing courses and things like that.
And I do find with horror, certainly personally, it was the best thing that happened to me as a writer, but I think it was also the best thing that happened to me as a person, because it does encourage you to look at what scares you, and rather than going, it scares me, therefore I will not look at it, it's a case of take the torch to the dark corner, find out what scares you. And it certainly made my writing better, but I think it also made my attitude to life much more proactive. I think maybe that's something that does really strike me and appeal to me about your writing, is I do feel that identity and who we truly are, and the fact that difficult circumstances, I realise this is all of literature up to a point, but circumstances make us who we are. I'm thinking of a couple of the ghost stories, and I won't do plot spoilers for whoever's listening, and I think those stories that it's not about something, it's not about being able to step into your own identity when it's easy. It's spotting opportunities when they happen in life to become more yourself, I think is something I've found horror is a home for.
Yes, I think that's totally right. I think one of the interesting things I've been observing, certainly in my little corner of the internet and my little corner of the world, is that particularly with women around the age of sort of around 40, around menopause, etc., there seems to be a massive desire to get back to our most authentic selves. And that is generally who we were when we were 14. And it's very funny because I see so many women who are just now starting to believe in themselves, and it's often going back to horror, going back to witchcraft, going back to very niche interests, and sort of bringing them in and sort of dusting off old aspects of self and things like that. And I think that's wonderful. It's certainly something I've noticed over the last year, and I wonder if it's a sort of post-pandemic thing where the pandemic shook us up so much that we can no longer really carry on masking in the same way that we might have been previously.
And that ability to give yourself permission to notice what it is you want more of in your life, rather than external permission, it is so important. I hear loud and clear you are not a write everyday person. Is there either, I mean, we were just talking about witchcraft, so I've got to use the word ritual now because it is about summoning. It's about summoning our creative confidence or our focus, our flow. What works for you? What are the exercises or rituals or times of day? What does it for you?
It's difficult to pin down because really what works for me really does vary day to day and particularly season to season. I have chronic seasonal affective disorder. I've had it for years and years. It's only getting worse as I get older and as I go into the menopause. So this time of year is very much fallow time for me. It's time in which I will do a lot of reading, time in which I will do a lot of inspiration generating, make a lot of notes, but in particular, very little actual writing. And I'm trying to get better about that because I would love to put something on paper during winter. So one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is working on like short stories, or you only have to write 500 words, but you do have to write 500 words. Which sounds like a tiny amount for someone who technically has the entire day to write. I'm aware I'm coming at it from a position of great privilege, but sometimes, particularly in winter, it's hard to force myself. And so I do have some little rituals. I like candles. I think the power of smell is very important. I have an absolute arsenal of scented candles that I buy from Home Sense or TK Maxx with a view to the smellscape of what I'm working on. So I've got for man-eater, which is about obviously the Amazon rainforest, I have pretty much every variant of orchid or lush rainforest candle you've ever thought of. So I have all of those to light when I want to get into the mood. I normally make a special cup or special pot of tea. I have various tea sets, some of which were gifted to me on the occasion of me leaving the bar, because a writer needs a tea set, was the thought of it. So I do sometimes use that to like force a sense of I'm going to sit here until I finish drinking this pot of tea. And I do make my own herbal tea blends and things like that. So that sometimes helps if I know that I've made a special tea blend for, say, productivity or creativity. It might make me a little bit more receptive to those sorts of energies. I use notebooks a lot. They're not by any means the sort of lovely, gorgeous notebooks that you see writers sort of fetishizing a lot. These gorgeous like leather bound or really big tomes or whatever. First of all, I'm a vegan, so that's just not going to happen. But secondly, I get the most usage out of those extremely boring A4 lined bound notebooks that you can buy in Sainsbury's. I have about 18 of them on the go at any particular time, one for each project, and I have an absolute back catalogue of them that would blow an archivist's mind. So candle, tea, notebook. Those are the minimum 3 things that are part of my ritual, to the extent that I have any ritual at all, because like I say, in winter in particular, I'm quite chaotic about as and when I do any work whatsoever.
This sounds, and just a shout out for the candle, because my phrase is babysitting the candle, that when I'm in that situation, and it's something that I've offered other people, that they use it in the writer's gym, if you don't have an actual candle, lighting the mental, imaginary candle, you have to stay on the sofa. So it stands to reason that you might as well be writing while the candle is burning. Reordering those thoughts is definitely one we use a lot. It's really interesting hearing you say, I know this time of year is the fallow period. And during it, I can say to myself, I only need to do 500 words, for example, but I do need to do 500 words. Keeping those things going and teaching brain and body that does pay off, and teaching brain and body that this is my normal is so powerful. You sound to me like you're doing a lot of those things. You know there is a fallow period. You know there are things you can do. So you haven't gone, it's a fallow period, I'm powerless. You've gone, it's a fallow period. Here are some things I can do. So I guess my question listening to that is, what is the I want?
It's really difficult to articulate, because I think for me, and again, this is me as now weirdly a full-time writer, there's two separate urges at work, and not many people talk about both of them, so I want, obviously, to have a finished manuscript that I can send out into the world to universal acclaim, that fits with my values, that tells a good story, etc. Rah, rah, rah. I also want to make money. I want to produce something that I can sell that will make the money I need to continue living. So there's two different wants, and they do sometimes go hand in hand in terms of, you can't sell an unfinished manuscript. You can't sell vague desires and notes on a page. You have to have a finished product. But on the other hand, the desire to make money quickly or sell something that will make the most amount of money in the least amount of time can sometimes conflict with those sort of long and crunchy, fallow and deep dive periods that you might need to put out something that you really feel has been wrenched from you, has been speaking to your core values that you have taken out of yourself and shown to the world. So there's a bit of a dichotomy in that you want to do big, deep artistic work, but on the other hand, you also need to survive through an acquisitions meeting and your agent saying whether they like it or not.
It's, again, going back to from the other side, seeing what it's like with an agent, with a publisher. Again, so important and actually so reassuring that the energy we have at any given time in our writing career, that this is lovely and this is terrifying and I have to deal with both. It doesn't magically become a different thing. We don't become magically a different thing at the next stage. And I really hope that's something everybody can take on board, that what we can do is get to know what we need as people and move it forward, which does not answer your question at all. But I think it's very important to say lots and lots of times. You had mentioned to me before we started recording that you were happy to talk about seasonal depression and how it affects writing, which I think is both powerful and important, and totally going to do it.
I've been very open on the internet about having seasonal affective disorder. And one of the things I have learned to always do is say seasonal affective disorder rather than sad, because if you say sad, people think you're just getting a bit the winter blues. But it can be absolutely debilitating. It can be like having a major depressive episode for 4 months out of every year. So to a certain extent, you have to plan for that and strategize for when that happens. So it is something I'm happy to talk about. Interestingly enough, one of the stories I've written, the short story I've written that's extremely close to my heart, is a short story called Darkness Falls, which is in Cloister Fox magazine, which was a lovely sort of bespoke British fanzine produced by Verity Holloway that ran sort of over the pandemic. And that was a short story I wrote about the experience of having seasonal affective disorder. And it really helped me sort of change my thinking towards it in terms of not necessarily seeing it as, well, still seeing it as a pathology, but also starting to sort of mythologize it for myself as being, you're actually just super in tune with nature and the cycles of nature. You are just living like an ancient Britain, maybe, because they certainly wouldn't have been going into bright offices and pushing themselves at this time of year. So, maybe you are just a little bit more like an ancient Celt, or maybe you are just a little bit more like a small mammal that needs to burrow, or a bulb that needs to sense that it's no longer fucking freezing before it starts putting out shoots.
There's a couple of things going on there, and I have to write while I'm thinking, because otherwise...
Go for it. I do as well normally. Happen. Yeah.
There's the practical and there is the emotional. Now, what I would mean by that in my own notes is the practical is what you've just described, as in the publisher will expect this thing at this time, or first the agent will expect this thing at this time, then the publisher will, and I have to get through an acquisitions meeting and I have to respond to whatever any of these people say at the time so that the book can happen. Therefore, I have to play the long game. So there is the long game. There is also the side dish of short stories, shorter thinkings out loud, thinking on the page that keep you going, that are the regular gym exercises that keep brain and body ticking over. So there's those things. Are there any other things that you would put in that column? Is it a case of, does another big idea come up and then it's like, oh, squirrel, I want to go and write this novel? Or does it come into it like that? Or are those the categories?
I think those are the categories, really. I don't tend to chase big ideas when they come up. I'm quite good about parking them and going, that's going to be book 5 or whatever.
So catch them, but keep them somewhere safe till it's their turn.
Yes. And what I'm notorious for doing is catch them, maybe start a notebook for them, maybe start buying all the books I want to read about them. Because when I have an idea, it tends to involve a heck lot of research because that's just the person I am. So at any given time, I'll have a book trolley filled with books that are germane to the next 3 ideas, maybe. But I won't start maybe reading them seriously or making notes or starting the project until it's that project's time. It's got to wait its turn.
It's rather a nice image from where I'm sitting that it is almost like building a nest in winter, that you're surrounding yourself with these things for next time, and you don't need to eat the nuts now, but you know that they are there for that.
It's very important. And also, I would say, build up your mental supply of nuts. So I tend to find in winter, I read a lot of other people's work. Either this is my prime blurbing season, because it's when I can really sort of sit and immerse myself in a novel. And then, I can sort of build up a sense of mental happiness by giving support to other people, by providing blurbs. It's also a time of year when I tend to do more editing projects for other people or query letter projects or things like that. Coaching other people is something I do a lot more of in winter, again, because it does me good to be around other people's high quality work, but it also does me good to feel like I'm helping other people. That's a useful thing during winter. If I don't feel like I can lift a pen on my own writing, being able to lift a pen on someone else's writing, even if it is just to yell, I think this book is fucking excellent, everyone should buy it. That's enough. That helps.
It sounds, hearing you say that, like you've seen this pattern enough times, that there have been enough winters where there is a fallow period, that then there is a spring after winter. So please correct me if this isn't it, but it feels, listening to you say that, like the fallow period will end. So I'm wondering, is there an I want in terms of that if I handed you that magic wand and I said, the magic wand is not interested in what do I think is reasonable or what do I think is grateful or ungrateful for the position I'm in. It doesn't understand a word of that. It only speaks, I wish, I would like, I want. What would you ask for?
Generally, I think I would want it to be mid-March.
Would you want it to be mid-March in January, or would you want to press fast forward and it be mid-March?
Mid-March in January, I think. I don't like the idea of losing time. But on the other hand, I know when things get better for me. And so I always want to skip ahead to that bit. And I've developed ways to fill the quiet periods. On the other hand, I am hungry for when the rejuvenation period comes. I did try a different I want this year. So I tried in early December, I want to come out of my seasonal fallow period with a good chunk, maybe 30 or 50,000 words on a new novel written. Just even if they're garbage words, I want to come out with like a basic beginning. And that lasted I had really good 2 weeks, and then it just, so...
You talk about draft 0, don't you?
Yeah, so I've learned it's not reasonable even to expect myself to do a consistent draft 0 during winter. It's not necessarily going to happen.
Okay, so that's the practical column. The other column is the emotional. So we're not in this column talking about the agent expects this, the acquisitions meeting expects that. That's over there, still exists, but we're over here now. A word you used was hungry. There was a sort of hungry to be doing projects. And I guess what I'm not clear on is how much of you is peace, maybe a bit strong, but at peace with the idea that in my fallow period, it's a fallow period. This is what happens in the fallow period. But maybe there is a new or a different hunger that, given that I know the fallow period happens and I know that spring is on the other side of that, is there something I'm now curious to bring into this period?
I think the answer to that is that my brain is perfectly at peace with the idea there's a fallow period. I know that this is a tough time for me, and I've developed all sorts of like coping strategies, etc. And I try to be very gentle with myself, but my heart is not at peace with the idea that there is a fallow period. My heart wants to be going full throttle, obviously, all through the year. even when my brain knows that is not actually reasonable and I have to make adjustments and accommodations.
Kick this one way out of the field if you want to, but is it definitely your heart?
That's interesting. I mean, it could be not my heart, it could be societal expectations and various other pressures arising out of the writing life. Comparison in particular is a notorious bitch for writers, because we look at what everyone else is doing with all their little rituals and all their like putting out 3 books a year, and we think, wow, I wish I could be like that. So you're right, it might not be my heart, it might be, I don't know, what organ is associated with, say, maybe envy or comparison.
Well, the word comparison was in my head because, as well as the should fairies, I've often talked about the comparison fairies.
Oh, yeah.
Who are the downside of social media, who flutter around your face going, look what he's doing. And it's so great because I hear you experiencing that, and you're definitely one of mine. Like, look what she's done, and look how good it is, and look at the short stories, and it just looks like so much fun. And Rob Shearman, I will just, because he, somewhere above my head right now, I think, yeah, you can just see at the top there, the 3-volume short story collection. Now, at the time where I was in tears to him going, I can't do structure, he was writing a 3-volume choose your own adventure story in which all of the short stories joined up. And everybody, no matter what's going on in your own head, everyone else seems to be having fun with the thing that you're scared you can't do. Now, I am also, enjoying some projects, in hell in other ones. I think the only difference between then and now is I get the first-hand evidence that so is everybody else. And maybe that's okay. But this is why I'm asking whether it truly is heart saying, I want more of that, in which case, rock on. There's totally things we can do with that. If it is something other than heart, e.g., not limited to, but e.g., societal pressure, social media, everybody else is doing this, that, and the other, that would raise different questions for me.
I think you're absolutely right in that it's very difficult in this. The more you become exposed to other people's everyday lives, and the more you become exposed to other authors' everyday lives, it becomes, I think, more hard to disentangle heart from that other thing, because you will always find a reason to compare yourself to someone else.
And knowing that, I would argue, is the piece that is available. Making the feelings go away, locking them in a box in manner of Dr. Sleep, leaning on the box and going, I'm fine, I don't have the feelings, and putting all the energy into making the feelings stay in their box.
Does that not work?
Not on the menu.
Well,
sorry, British Empire.
I went away to a British boarding school when I was 9, so that's pretty much the only emotional repertoire I have, the box.
Yeah. What I do, there's a game that listeners will know, but I don't know if you've come across this, that I do, called Excuses Bingo. And what we do, telling you the title first is a little bit of a spoiler, but what we do is we write down, by the time so-and-so was my age, they'd written this many of whatever it is I want to do. My sister would hate this. This isn't the kind of writer so-and-so wanted me to be. So-and-so is better at writing than me. What if it's weird? What if it's boring? And I love how those two are always so close together. What if it's too individual? What if it's not individual enough, right next to each other? And what we then do is we, in manner of Anne Lamott with bird spotting, we write the time that it flies past. Just like if you look out of the window and a robin flies past and your brain just goes robin. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't judge the robin. It just goes robin. Yeah. And then if a sparrow goes past, you think sparrow. It doesn't judge anything. You just go sparrow. What you're then able to do gradually is go, oh, that thought that seems like such a big deal today that just happened at, 11:21 a.m. Oh, it happened at 11:21 a.m. yesterday. Who knew? And then you start to get to have a giggle with it, that it is what your brain does to prevent you from having a perfectly nice day. Because the thing about a perfectly nice day is, in a perfectly nice day, we're probably going to get more stuff done, get more into a state of flow than in an I hate me or I think I'm doing something wrong moment. And it keeps you in status quo, because the brain, bless it, it thinks status quo means safe, and it thinks safe means good. And where it is, I will get eaten by a polar bear, sure, safe means good. But the polar bear is not going to eat you. The novel that you're going to write is not going to eat you by getting written. And it's us being kind to our thoughts. So what I have next to me is an imaginary armchair, which is the shape of when I was a kid. We had this box of polystyrene, and this polystyrene from whatever my mum had bought came out in the shape of a perfect little armchair for one of my Care Bears. And to this day, I can still remember putting my tiny Care Bear in this little polystyrene armchair. And I see the armchair on my desk. And when it's a negative thought, it's like, okay, I know what you're doing. Yes, I understand. Sit. And it's not unlike cat sitting. Sometimes the cat has opinions. It's going to interrupt, but that doesn't mean that it's right about everything. And it doesn't mean that it's going to get in the way. So none of that may be remotely relevant for today, but it's there in the background. And I guess what it would be for me is there are little things we can always change if we want to, but they work best when it comes from a position of valuing where you already are and who you already are.
I think that's interesting because it's very much like learning to work with your own subconscious and learning to observe the thoughts of your own subconscious. I myself do something slightly similar in that because I'm a tarot reader, every morning I pick a tarot card, I blind pick it for the day, and I reflect on what the meaning and symbolism of that card is, and I have it on my desk while I work. And it's interesting, sometimes it chimes with the day, sometimes it doesn't chime with the day, sometimes it chimes with the day in unexpected ways, but just the act of having a symbol through which to interrogate the day does actually help you keep an observational eye on your own thoughts and what's happening around you. So that's a tool that I use in particular.
And it's so interesting that when we talked about rituals, that wasn't in your mind. But when we talk about tools, it is. And maybe that's important too, that things that somebody else wouldn't realise are so damn practical are practical. Yes. Knowing what those are for you.
I'm imagining people come to you at the writer's gym or listen to this podcast because they know it's bloody hard. So it would be absolutely trite of me to say that, but it is bloody hard. But if it's something you want to do, then it is something you must do. And unfortunately, it's as simple as that. It's both as simple and as hard as that.
Never easy, always simple. It has been such a pleasure, Ali.
What I've started to do is actually go through my back catalogue of short stories and bind them up in small self-published micro collections. So I put out one last year called London Weird, which is 3 stories about weird London, available on Amazon. 99p in ebook, so really cheap, read it on your lunch break. But I'm going to do the same this year with stories about sort of cosmic horror and old gods, and that short story is going to be in it. So at some point this year I'll be releasing a micro collection that will encompass that short story as well. So I'm just packaging up my back catalogue, partly so people can have ready access to it, and also partly because it gives me such a personal sense of satisfaction as someone who thought they would never write short stories, they'd always be particularly shit at writing short stories, to now have this absolute sort of gold mine of back content that I can make into these little things I'm really proud of.
So the very useful thing to say to oneself, I guess, in most situations, including this is the right thing for me now. And if something else is the right thing for me later, that's okay too.
That's absolutely what I would say. The one time where I think that does not hold true, unfortunately, is that you can only be a debut novelist in traditional publishing once with that name and that book. And I say with that name and that book because I know a lot of people who have had many bites at the debut cherry by rebranding themselves successfully under a new pen name for each genre. And that is magnificent. You know, that what a skill. But for one particular book and one particular name, you can't command the sort of debut uplift that you traditionally get in advance more than once. So if you've self-published it beforehand, or maybe you've small press published it beforehand, you are unlikely to be able to use it as your big splashy debut. That's all I'll say. So that really is the only situation in which, as an industry standard, I'd say to be careful.
And this is why that question that you brought about the practical and the emotional weighings up of I've got a long project that I want to work on, but there are lots of small things too. And I suppose in being a firm flag waver of what is right for one writer is not necessarily what's right for the next writer. Some people every day, some people bits and bobs. What I'm definitely hearing here is that you know yourself well, that you know there will be more active times and less active times. And while it's absolutely admirable that you're looking at a fallow period and going, how can I use this better? How can I make myself happier? How can I make my writing happier? You also understand that playing the long game is worth it. So for anybody who's maybe looking at getting their first novel out, taking the time to make that first novel as truly itself as it can be is absolutely worth it, rather than going, oh, it might never happen, so I'll just get it out there fast.
Yes, absolutely. I think the impatience is something we all struggle with, and the I'm done with it is something we all struggle with. And for debut novelists, that is a particular scourge, because you might be doing yourself out of a nice splashy debut and some money in the future. So that's probably the only time I would urge caution. I've seen authors do wonderful things, such as, I'll give you a concrete example. Alison Littlewood put out a really lovely little novella with an indie press, which was all about letters about the Cottingley fairies. And it was a very lovely little tiny indie novella. It was lovely. And she put that out. And then multiple years later, she went back to that novella and used the letters as the backbone of a novel, which she then sold to Titan under a new pen name, A.J. Elwood. And it's called The Cottingley Cuckoo. And it's an absolute banger. But that's an example of how fluid and useful you can be with your backlist in probably any situation apart from that big debut novel.
So be you, enjoy what you are doing, and also reach out to other writers. I mean, going back to that fallow period, another thing that we do at the Writers' Gym, and I do both with my members and with other writing friends, is if it's not a writing room day, most days we see each other online or in person, but other days, right, bum is hitting chair now. Bum will not leave chair until next hour, and then you've got your friend to go, yay, or you do it with somebody else in some other way, but keep reaching out to other people. It's not about publishing the embryo version of what this beautiful thing could be eventually.
Absolutely.
Well, Ali Wilkes, thank you so much for joining the Writers' Gym.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I felt uplifted and enriched by it.
You've visited the Writers' Gym with author and coach Dr Rachel Knightley. Production and sound design are by Ashley Lexine, and theme music is by Chris Gregory. To join a Writers' Gym workout online or in London, as a guest or as a member, visit writersgym.com or email thewritersgym@rachelknightley.com.